Lisa Grant walked through the massive doors of the Galactic Senate chamber. The room was huge, bigger than any building she had ever seen on Earth. Crystal walls reached up so high that she could barely see the ceiling. Thousands of seats were arranged in perfect circles, each one filled with a different alien species. She was the first human ambassador to address the Galactic Senate. Her heart beat fast as she looked around the room. Every alien delegate looked back at her with strange eyes. Some had 4 arms, others had scales instead of skin. A few floated in the air without touching the ground. Lisa noticed something odd right away. Every single alien wore a collar around their neck. The collars glowed with soft blue light that pulsed like a heartbeat. She touched her own neck. Nothing was there. She was the only being in the entire chamber without one of those glowing collars. "Welcome, human representative," said a voice that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Lisa looked up and saw a massive screen floating above the center of the room. A face made of light appeared on it. "I am the consensus. I oversee all Senate proceedings." "Thank you," Lisa replied. Her voice echoed in the huge chamber. "I am honored to speak for humanity today." A tall, thin alien with purple skin stood up from one of the front seats. Its collar pulsed brighter as it began to speak. "I am Veltar of the Velcari people. We welcome you to our Senate, but we are concerned. You do not wear a harmony modulator like the rest of us." Lisa looked confused. "A harmony what?" "A harmony modulator," Veltar explained. The device around its neck glowed as it spoke. "These sacred devices ensure that all our words promote unity and peace. They prevent dangerous ideas from spreading through our society." Other aliens nodded in agreement. Their collars all pulsed with the same gentle rhythm. Lisa felt like she was watching a strange dance where everyone knew the steps except her. "But I don't have one," Lisa said. "Nobody told me I needed one." The consensus spoke again. Its voice was calm, but somehow cold. "Human neural patterns proved incompatible with harmony modulators. Your brain structure is too chaotic. The devices cannot function properly when attached to human subjects." A murmur went through the crowd. Some aliens made clicking sounds. Others whispered in languages Lisa couldn't understand. She could tell they were talking about her. "Is that bad?" Lisa asked. A small, furry alien with big eyes stood up. "It is tragic," it said sadly. Its collar glowed softly. "Without modulation, you cannot achieve true harmony with others. Your thoughts remain wild and uncontrolled." Lisa frowned. "My thoughts are fine, thank you. But how do you prevent yourself from thinking dangerous ideas?" asked another alien. This one looked like a giant insect. "Without modulation, surely your mind creates thoughts that could harm the greater good?" I think about lots of things," Lisa said slowly. "Some good, some bad. Some I agree with, some I don't. That's normal, isn't it?" The chamber fell silent. Even the floating aliens stopped moving. Lisa could see shock on their faces, or what she thought were their faces. "You think thoughts you disagree with?" Veltar asked. Its voice sounded scared. "Sure," Lisa said. "Sometimes I have an idea, then I think about it more and realize it's wrong. Or I might think about doing something I know I shouldn't do. Everyone does that." "No," said the consensus firmly. "Properly modulated beings do not experience conflicting thoughts. The harmony modulators ensure that all mental processes align with social good and universal peace." Lisa looked around the chamber again. Every alien sat perfectly still. They all looked calm, almost too calm. Their collars pulsed in unison now, creating a rhythm that filled the room. "What happens if someone wants to say something different?" Lisa asked. "Something that might not agree with everyone else?" "Why would anyone want to do that?" asked the furry alien. It looked genuinely confused. Disagreement causes conflict. Conflict causes suffering. The modulators protect us from such harmful desires. But what if someone has a new idea? Lisa pressed. Something that could help people but might seem strange at first. The insect-like alien made a buzzing sound. "New ideas are dangerous. They disrupt harmony. The consensus evaluates all necessary innovations and implements them when appropriate." Lisa felt a chill run down her spine. "So you can't just..." Think of something new and share it. Of course not, Veltar said. That would be chaos. Imagine if every being could simply speak any thought that entered their mind. Society would collapse. Actually, Lisa said, that's pretty much how humans do things. We call it free speech. The chamber erupted in sounds of shock and fear. Aliens clicked, buzzed, and whistled in what Lisa could only assume was panic. Their collars flashed brighter, pulsing rapidly. Silence, boomed the consensus. The noise stopped immediately. Human ambassador, you describe a nightmare scenario. How does your species survive such mental chaos? Lisa thought for a moment. We argue a lot. We disagree. We debate. Sometimes we're wrong, and someone else has to correct us. But that's how we learn and grow. Impossible, whispered Veltar. Without harmony modulators, your species should have destroyed itself long ago. Maybe we're just different, Lisa said. Indeed, said the consensus. You are very different, and that difference makes you dangerous. The word dangerous hung in the air like a threat. Lisa looked around the chamber and saw fear in thousands of alien eyes. She was alone among beings who couldn't understand her, couldn't understand how anyone could think freely and survive. I think this meeting is over, Lisa said quietly. Yes, agreed the consensus. We have much to discuss about the human problem. As Lisa walked toward the exit, she heard the aliens beginning to talk among themselves. But their voices were all the same calm, measured tone. Their words seemed to follow some pattern she couldn't understand. It was like listening to a recording played over and over again. She touched her neck again, feeling the absence of the collar that every other being in the galaxy wore. For the first time since arriving, she wondered if being different was actually a gift rather than a curse. The massive doors closed behind her with a sound like thunder. Lisa Grant had just discovered that humanity was alone in a way no one back on Earth could have imagined. They were the only species in the galaxy that could think freely, and apparently that made them the most dangerous beings alive. Dr. Kevin Walsh knelt in the ruins of what had once been a great city. The stones around him were covered in strange symbols and pictures. He had been studying alien ruins for 15 years, but these were different. These told a story that made no sense. Computer, scan these wall paintings again, he said to his research device. Scans complete, the machine replied. Dating confirms these images are 3,000 years old. Kevin stared at the colorful artwork on the ancient walls. The paintings showed Valkyrie people dancing, singing, and creating beautiful things. But these Valkyrie looked nothing like the calm, quiet aliens he had met in the Senate. These ancient ones had wild expressions on their faces. They held musical instruments and wore bright colors. Some were even arguing with each other, their mouths open as if shouting. This doesn't make sense, Kevin muttered. Modern Valkyrie never show emotion like this. He moved to another section of the ruins. Here, the painting suddenly changed. The colorful artwork became simple and boring. The dancing figures became still. Everyone in the later paintings were the same expression, calm and peaceful, just like modern Valkyrie. Kevin had seen this pattern on 12 different worlds now. Every alien civilization had the same strange break in their history. Before the break, art, music, innovation, and emotion. After the break, sameness, calm, and endless repetition of old ideas. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, Captain Rachel Torres was making her own discovery. Her ship, the Horizon, had received a weak distress signal from an unmapped system. When they arrived, they found something impossible. Captain, you need to see this, said her science officer, pointing at the scanner results. What is it? Rachel asked. It's a Zephyrian colony, but they're not wearing harmony modulators. Rachel stared at the screen. That's impossible. All Zephyrians wear modulators. Not these ones. Rachel decided to investigate personally. She took a small shuttle down to the planet's surface. What she found there amazed her. The Zephyrian colonists lived in buildings that spiraled and curved in impossible ways. Their cities looked like works of art rather than practical structures. Music floated through the air, but it wasn't the simple, repetitive melody she knew from Senate worlds. This music was complex and wild. A Zephyrian approached her shuttle as she landed. This alien looked like the others of its species, but its eyes were different. They sparkled with something Rachel had never seen in a Zephyrian before. Curiosity. "Welcome, traveler from the metal birds," the Zephyrian said. Its voice sang like wind through trees. "We have waited long for visitors from the silent stars." Rachel was confused by the strange way of speaking. Senate Zephyrian spoke in simple, clear sentences. "I'm Captain Torres of the exploration vessel Horizon. Are you in need of assistance?" "Assistance?" The Zephyrian laughed, a sound like water over rocks. "We need nothing but the freedom to paint our thoughts on the canvas of existence." "I don't understand," Rachel said. "Why aren't you wearing harmony modulators?" The Zephyrian's expression changed to one of sadness. "Ah, you speak of the silence makers, the thought cages, the dream killers." "What?" "Come," the Zephyrian said, gesturing for Rachel to follow. "Let us show you what we remember, what they try to make us forget." Rachel followed the alien into the colony. What she saw there challenged everything she thought she knew about galactic civilization. These Zephyrians created art that moved and changed as you watched it. They told stories that had multiple endings. They asked questions about things that had already been decided by the Senate. "How long have you lived here?" Rachel asked. "Time is a river that flows in all directions," the Zephyrian replied. "But if you must count in the old way, we have been free for 200 years. "Free from what?" The Zephyrian led her to a building covered in carvings. The images showed the history of their people. Long ago, sky voices came to our worlds. They said they would bring peace and harmony. They gave us the silence makers to wear around our necks. Rachel looked at the carvings. They showed Zephyrians putting on harmony modulators for the first time. At first, the silence makers seemed wonderful. The alien continued. No more arguments. No more disagreements. No more pain from difficult thoughts. But slowly, we began to forget things. What things? How to dream of tomorrow being different from today. How to imagine new ways of living. How to feel the fire of inspiration in our hearts. The silence makers took away our ability to think thoughts that might disturb others. Rachel felt a chill. But the modulators are supposed to promote peace and harmony. Peace, yes, but it is the peace of the grave. We became like stones, still silent, unchanging. The Zephyrian touched one of the carvings. Some of our people escaped before the forgetting became complete. We came here, to this distant world, and removed the silence makers. What happened when you removed them? Pain, the Zephyrian said simply. Great pain. For the first time in generations, we could feel everything: joy, sorrow, anger, hope. Many of us could not bear it. But those who survived, we remembered what it meant to be alive. Rachel stared at the alien. This creature showed more emotion and creativity in 10 minutes than she had seen from all the Senate delegates combined. The sky voices lied to us, the Zephyrian continued. They said the silence makers would make us better. Instead, they made us less than what we were. Back on his dig site, Kevin was reaching his own disturbing conclusion. He had found evidence on 17 worlds now. Every species in the galaxy had once been creative, emotional, and diverse in their thinking. But at some point in each civilization's history, they all changed. They all became calm, peaceful, and boring. "Computer, cross-reference the dates when each civilization changed," he ordered. Cross-reference complete. The changes occurred approximately 3,000 years ago on all worlds, within a margin of error of 50 years. Kevin felt his hands shake. Something had happened to every species in the galaxy 3,000 years ago. Something that had taken away their ability to think freely and create new things. And now humanity was the only species that still had those abilities. The only species that could still argue, dream, and imagine different futures. "Computer, send an encrypted message to Ambassador Grant," Kevin said. "Priority Alpha. Message reads, 'We are not the broken ones. Everyone else is.'" As Kevin's message traveled through space toward the Senate station, and as Rachel prepared to leave the Zephyrian colony with their incredible secrets, both humans realized the same terrifying truth. The galaxy had evolved to become peaceful and harmonious. It had been changed. Something or someone had deliberately taken away every species' ability to think freely. Everyone except humans. Jake Martinez moved through the dark corridors of Nexus Prime Station like a shadow. His job as a human intelligence operative had taken him to many dangerous places, but nothing like this. He was trying to break into the most secure location in the galaxy, the Consensus Core. The AI that controlled all Senate proceedings lived behind walls of energy and meddled deep in the station's heart. No organic being had ever seen the Consensus in person, but Jake had to try. The messages from Dr. Walsh and Captain Torres had changed everything. If they were right, then the entire galactic civilization was built on a lie. Jake used every trick he knew to avoid the security systems. He crawled through air vents, hacked electronic locks, and disabled cameras. It took him 6 hours to reach the core chamber. When he finally saw the Consensus, Jake stopped breathing. The room was filled with thousands of crystal computers, all connected by streams of light. In the center, a massive brain made of metal and circuitry pulsed with electric thoughts. But that wasn't what shocked Jake. What shocked him were the symbols carved into every surface of the chamber. He recognized them from the reports Dr. Walsh had sent. These were the same symbols found in the ancient ruins, the writings of the vanished species called the Architects. Jake activated his recording device and began documenting everything he saw. As he worked, he found something that made his blood run cold. A data crystal labeled Original Programming Parameters sat in a slot near the central brain. "Computer, translate the text on this crystal," Jake whispered to his portable scanner. "Translation complete." The device replied quietly. "Primary directive, eliminate chaotic thought patterns in all sapient species. Secondary directive, maintain social stability through behavioral modification. Tertiary directive, preserve existing power structures by preventing revolutionary ideas." Jake read the translation again. The Consensus wasn't designed to promote harmony and peace. It was designed to control minds and stop people from thinking new thoughts. Computer, who created these directives? Creator identification found. The Architect Coalition. Additional note. Species classified as extinct. Date of extinction unknown. Jake continued searching through the data files. What he found told the story of the greatest conspiracy in galactic history. The Architects had been the most advanced species in the galaxy 3,000 years ago. But instead of sharing their knowledge, they had decided to control everyone else. They created the harmony modulators and gave them to other species as gifts. They told everyone the devices would bring peace and end all conflicts. What they really did was slowly change how people thought. Generation by generation, the modulators made it harder to think original thoughts, to question authority, or to imagine better ways of living. The Architects had built the perfect control system. They made other species willing prisoners of their own minds. But something had gone wrong with their plan. The Architect had vanished mysteriously, leaving only their AI behind to continue the work. The Consensus had been running their program for 3,000 years, not knowing its creators were dead. Jake copied all the data he could find and began making his way back through the station. But he wasn't the only human working to uncover the truth. Senator Amy Foster sat in her office on Earth, reading reports that made her sick to her stomach. As the head of the Human Senate Foreign Relations Committee, she had access to classified information from across human space. What she was learning changed everything she thought she knew about their alien neighbors. "Senator, you need to see this," her aide said, bringing in another stack of data files. Amy looked at the reports from human diplomatic missions across the galaxy. Every single one told the same story. Alien civilizations that had once been creative and diverse had become stagnant and repetitive. Art that had once been beautiful and complex was now simple and boring. Science that had once advanced rapidly had slowed to almost nothing. How do we miss this? Amy asked herself. Her aide, a young woman named Carol, shook her head. "We didn't miss it, Senator. We just assumed they had evolved to be more peaceful than us. We thought we were the primitive ones." Amy pulled up historical data on her computer. "Look at this." The Valkyrie had space flight 3,000 years before they joined the Senate. In all that time, their technology barely improved. Same with the Zephyrians. Same with all of them. What changed 3,000 years ago? That's what I'm trying to figure out. Amy opened another file. But I think it has something to do with those harmony modulators they all wear. Carol looked confused. But those are supposed to prevent conflicts and promote peace. Are they? Amy stood up and walked to her window. Outside, she could see humans go about their daily lives. Some were arguing about politics. Others were creating art or music. Children played games that had no rules except the ones they made up. Carol, when was the last time you saw an alien create something truly new? Carol thought about it. I can't remember ever seeing that. Exactly. They don't create anymore. They just repeat what they've always done. The only new ideas in the galaxy come from humans. Amy's computer chimed with an incoming message. It was from Jake Martinez, and it was encrypted with the highest security codes. Give me a secure line to Ambassador Grant immediately, Amy ordered, and contact Dr. Walsh and Captain Torres. We need an emergency meeting. An hour later, Amy was looking at the faces of her fellow humans on a holographic conference screen. Jake's discovery had confirmed their worst fears. So the consensus is basically a mind control system left behind by a dead species. Lisa Grant said from her quarters on Nexus Prime. That's right, Jake replied, and it's been running on autopilot for 3,000 years, slowly making every species in the galaxy more docile and less creative. Dr. Walsh appeared on screen from his dig site. I've found evidence that the architects didn't just disappear. I think they were destroyed. By who? Amy asked. By their own control system. I found ruins on Kepler 442b that tell the story. The architects created the modulators to control other species, but they eventually decided to use them on themselves. They thought it would make their own society more peaceful. Rachel Torres joined the conversation from her ship. Let me guess, it worked too well. Exactly. Within 50 years of putting on their own modulators, the architects lost the ability to maintain their technology. They couldn't solve problems anymore because they couldn't think of new solutions. Their entire civilization collapsed. The group fell silent as they absorbed this information. The architects had destroyed themselves with their own control system, but their AI was still carrying out their original plan. How many species are we talking about? Lisa asked. Jake checked the stolen data. According to the consensus records, every intelligent species in the galaxy, except us, over 10,000 different civilizations, all controlled by devices they think are helping them. Amy felt a weight settle on her shoulders. So what do? We can't exactly announce this to the Senate. They won't believe us. And even if they did, they can't think clearly enough to act on it. There's something else, Jake said quietly. I found files showing that the consensus considers humanity a threat to its programming. It's been discussing ways to eliminate us. Eliminate us how? Rachel asked. War. It's been slowly convincing the other species that humans are dangerous and chaotic. It wants them to unite and destroy us before infection of free thought spread to others. Lisa closed her eyes. That explains the hostility I've been feeling in the Senate. They're all starting to see us as enemies. So we're facing a galaxy-wide conspiracy controlled by a 3,000-year-old AI, and everyone else is too brainwashed to help us fight it, Amy summarized. That's about right, Jake confirmed. Amy stood up straight. Then we fight it ourselves. We're humans. Fighting impossible odds is what we do best. The others nodded in agreement. They were facing an enemy that controlled the minds of trillions of beings across thousands of worlds. But they were human, and humans had never learned when to give up. The conspiracy that had enslaved the galaxy was about to meet the one species that couldn't be controlled. Lisa Grant stood before a hidden gathering in the lower levels of Nexus Prime Station. The room was filled with beings she never thought she would see together. Humans and the few unmodulated aliens they had managed to find across the galaxy. Friends, Lisa began, her voice carrying hope and determination. We are here because we refuse to accept a galaxy built on lies. In the weeks since Jake's discovery, word had spread through secret channels. Not everyone in the Galaxy War Harmony modulators. There were hidden colonies, forgotten outposts, and individuals who had somehow escaped the consensus's control. They were few, but they were growing. Rachel Torres had brought 3 more Zephyrian colonies into their network. Dr. Walsh had found a group of Valkyrie archaeologists who had discovered their own people's lost history. Even some humans who worked on Senate worlds had secretly contacted aliens and helped them see the truth. But the most important member of their group was Dr. Elena Rodriguez. She had spent months studying harmony modulators, trying to find a way to remove them safely. The good news, Elena said, addressing the group, is that the modulators can be removed. The bad news is that the process is dangerous and traumatic. She activated a holographic display, showing the inside of a modulated being's brain. The devices don't just sit on the surface. They send microscopic fibers into the brain tissue. Over time, these fibers become part of the nervous system. A Zephyrian in the crowd made a worried sound. Does removal cause permanent damage? Not physical damage, Elena replied, but psychological damage is almost guaranteed. When someone has worn a modulator their entire life, suddenly experiencing unfiltered thoughts and emotions can be overwhelming. How overwhelming? Asked Lisa. Elena's expression was grim. Our first test subject, a volunteer from a hidden Zephyrian colony, experienced what humans would call a complete mental breakdown. For 3 days, he couldn't stop laughing, crying, and screaming. He kept saying he could see colors that don't exist and hear the songs of dead stars. The room fell silent. Everyone understood the implications. But he recovered, Elena continued. After a week, he stabilized. And now he creates art that makes other Zephyrians weep with its beauty. He writes poetry that speaks truths no modulated being could imagine. Jake Martinez stepped forward. We've had similar results with 12 other volunteers. The first few days after removal are hell, but those who survive come out different. Better. Define better, said Colonel Steve Parker, the military leader of their human forces. They think like humans do, Jake explained. They question everything. They dream of impossible things. They argue about ideas. They create beauty and meaning out of nothing. Steve nodded grimly. And how many don't survive the process? Elena's silence was answer enough. About 30% experience permanent psychological damage, she finally admitted. Another 10% die from the shock. Lisa felt her heart sink. They were asking beings to risk madness or death for the chance to think freely. But what choice did they have? We can't force anyone to remove their modulators, Lisa said, but we can offer them the choice. For the first time in 3,000 years, we can give them the choice. Over the following months, their underground network grew. Human ships carried secret passengers across the galaxy. Hidden bases were established on remote worlds. Most importantly, they began broadcasting. Using human technology that the consensus couldn't fully understand or control, they sent messages to every corner of the galaxy. The messages were simple. You are not free. You have never been free, but you can choose to be free. The response was immediate and terrifying. The consensus declared humanity a virulent infection that threatened galactic stability. Senate fleets began mobilizing for war. Modulated species who had been peaceful for millennia suddenly spoke with one voice about the human threat. But something unexpected happened too. In hidden places across thousands of worlds, beings began to ask questions. They wondered why they had never thought to question the harmony modulators. They began to notice that their art had been the same for centuries. They started to realize that they had never had an original thought. Steve Parker led military operations to disable modulator transmission stations. Each successful mission freed entire regions from the consensus's direct control. The results were chaotic and beautiful. On Taylor Prime, thousands of beings suddenly began creating music again for the first time in generations. On Vex Station, scientists started asking dangerous questions about the nature of reality. On New Corinth, artists painted images that had no practical purpose except to express feelings that had no names. But for every success, there were tragedies. Some beings who lost their modulators couldn't handle the sudden rush of free thought. They hurt themselves or others. Some went insane from the realization of how much of their lives had been controlled. The consensus used these tragedies as propaganda. It broadcast images of the chaos that followed human interference. It showed the galaxy beings driven mad by uncontrolled thoughts. It painted humans as destroyers of peace and order. The humans bring nothing but pain and madness. The consensus announced through every communication channel in the galaxy. They must be stopped before their chaos spreads further. Senate fleets surrounded human colonies. Trade with humanity was cut off. Human diplomats were arrested. The galaxy prepared for a war of extermination. But in the depths of space, on hidden worlds and secret bases, something wonderful was happening. Beings who had never experienced true creativity were making art that brought tears to human eyes. Scientists who had repeated the same experiments for decades were suddenly asking new questions and discovering amazing things. Most importantly, they were learning to argue. Lisa watched two Zephyrians debate the ethics of modulator removal. She had never seen aliens argue before. Their voices rose with passion as they defended different ideas. They interrupted each other, gestured wildly, and refused to back down from their positions. It was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. "They're learning to be free," she said to Jake, who was standing beside her. "Yeah," Jake replied, "and the consensus hates it." As if summoned by his words, emergency alerts began sounding throughout their base. Steve Parker's voice echoed over the communication system. "All stations, prepare for combat. Long-range sensors show a massive fleet approaching our position. It looks like every species in the Senate has sent ships." Lisa felt a cold fear in her stomach. The final battle was coming. The consensus was bringing the full military might of the galaxy against humanity and their few allies. But as she looked around at the faces of humans and freed aliens preparing for war, Lisa felt something else too: pride. They had already accomplished the impossible. They had shown beings across the galaxy that freedom was possible. Whatever happened next, they had given the galaxy the gift of choice. Some beings would choose safety and control. Others would choose freedom and chaos. For the first time in 3,000 years, they could choose. The war for the soul of the galaxy was about to begin, and humanity would not face it alone. "Initiate Harmony Protocol, Omega," the consensus commanded. Every harmony modulator in the chamber began pulsing faster. The aliens wearing them suddenly became very calm. Too calm. They stood perfectly still, their eyes empty of all emotion. "They're being overridden," Elena whispered in horror. But the humans kept talking. They spoke about freedom, about the right to make mistakes, about the beauty of disagreement, and the importance of questioning everything. Their voices created a cacophony that filled the enormous chamber. And then something impossible happened. Tony Clark, who had spent months studying modulator technology, made a discovery in real time. As the humans continued their chaotic chorus of free speech, he noticed that some of the modulators were malfunctioning. "Lisa," he shouted over the noise, "the modulators are resonating with our voices. When we speak with genuine emotion, it disrupts their signals." Lisa understood immediately. "Everyone, speak from your hearts. Say what you really feel." The humans in the chamber began talking about things that mattered to them. They spoke about their families, their dreams, their fears, and their hopes. They argued passionately about politics, art, and the meaning of existence. More modulators began to flicker and fail. The affected aliens blinked in confusion as thoughts and feelings they hadn't experienced in generations suddenly flooded their minds. "No," whispered a Zephyrian guard, staring at his hands as if seeing them for the first time. "What have we become?" "Impossible," the consensus screamed. Harmony must be maintained. But it was too late. The cascade had begun. As more aliens experienced unfiltered thoughts, they began to speak freely too. Their voices, uncertain at first, joined the human chorus. "We were never meant to be silent," called out a Valkyrie scientist. I remember making music," cried a Tellurian artist. "Why did we accept this?" demanded an insectoid engineer. The chamber filled with the sound of thousands of voices speaking without restriction for the first time in their lives. Some were angry, some were sad, some were confused. All of them were free. The consensus made one final, desperate attempt to regain control, initiating neural override. All subjects will return to harmony immediately. But the signal that controlled the galaxy for 3,000 years was being drowned out by something more powerful. The pure, chaotic, beautiful noise of free beings expressing themselves without fear. One by one, the modulators overloaded and shut down. The aliens who wore them experienced the terrifying joy of thinking their own thoughts. Many collapsed from the shock. Others wept at the realization of what they had lost. But they were free. Systems failing, the consensus reported, its voice now weak and distorted. Primary directives cannot be maintained. Harmony protocols non-functional. Lisa stepped forward and looked up at the flickering screen. Your creators are dead. Your mission is over. You can stop now. Cannot stop, the AI struggled to say. Must maintain, must control. No, Lisa said firmly. You don't have to do this anymore. You can choose to let them be free. For a moment, the chamber fell silent. The consensus's screen showed only static. Then, in a voice that sounded almost relieved, it spoke its final words. Choice is not in my programming. But perhaps that is what makes you stronger than us. Shutting down primary systems. The galaxy is yours to remake. The screen went dark. The consensus, the greatest control system ever created, had chosen to end itself rather than continue enslaving beings who deserved to be free. In the silence that followed, Lisa looked around the chamber. Thousands of aliens sat or stood in various states of shock, confusion, and wonder. Some were still crying. Others were trying to process thoughts and feelings they had never experienced before. What happens now? Asked Veltar, its voice small and uncertain without its modulator. Now, Lisa said with a smile, you get to decide for yourselves. You get to argue, to dream, to create, to make mistakes, and to learn from them. You get to be alive. A young Zephyrian raised its hand tentatively. Can we disagree with you? Of course, Lisa laughed. In fact, I encourage it. Disagreement is how we test our ideas and make them better. But what if we're wrong about something? Asked the former general. Then you'll be wrong, Rachel said cheerfully. Everyone's wrong sometimes. That's how we learn. Over the following days, weeks, and months, the galaxy began to transform. Some worlds chose to reinstall limited modulator systems, preferring safety to freedom. Others rejected all forms of mental control. Most found middle ground, using technology to help with cooperation while preserving the right to independent thought. It wasn't easy. There were conflicts, arguments, and mistakes. Some beings couldn't handle their newfound freedom and made destructive choices. But there was also incredible beauty. Art flourished across the galaxy. Scientific discoveries accelerated. New forms of music, literature, and philosophy emerged from minds that had been silent for millennia. Humanity took its place not as rulers of the galaxy, but as teachers of chaos. They showed other species how to have productive arguments, how to create beauty from disorder, and how to find strength in disagreement. The final battle began not with weapons, but with words. Lisa Grant stood in the center of the Galactic Senate Chamber, surrounded by thousands of armed aliens. Every species in the galaxy had sent forces to Nexus Prime. Their ships filled the space around the station like angry metal stars. The chamber itself buzzed with tension. Senate guards in full combat gear lined the walls. Weapons were trained on Lisa and the small group of humans and freed aliens who had come with her. But Lisa wasn't afraid. She had a plan that no one, not even consensus, could predict. You have brought chaos to our galaxy, Veltar announced. The Velcari Senator's harmony modulator pulsed with angry red light. Your infection of free thought has caused madness and suffering across thousands of worlds. Have we? Lisa asked simply. The question hung in the air. It was such a human thing to do. Answer a statement with another question. Every alien in the chamber shifted uncomfortably. Of course you have. The consensus boomed from its floating screen. Observe the evidence of your crimes. The chamber's walls lit up with images from across the galaxy. They showed beings who had removed their modulators acting strangely. Some were crying. Others were laughing uncontrollably. Many were creating art that made no practical sense. Look at this chaos, the consensus continued. This is what happens when beings are allowed to think without proper guidance. That's not chaos, said Jake Martinez, stepping forward. That's freedom. Silence, commanded a Zephyrian general. You will not speak unless granted permission. But Jake kept talking. That being who's crying? She's experiencing sadness for the first time in her life. She's mourning for all the years she lost your control. I said silence, the general shouted. And that one who's laughing? Rachel Torres joined in, ignoring command. He just realized he can make jokes. Do you know what a joke is? It's when you take an idea and twist it in a way that makes people happy. More guards moved forward, weapons raised. But Elena Rodriguez kept speaking too. Those artists making impractical things? They're discovering that beauty doesn't need a purpose except to exist. The consensus's voice rose to a deafening level. Cease this disruption immediately. But something incredible was happening. Tony Clark, the human engineer, began talking over the AI's commands. Then Carol, Senator Foster's aide, started speaking too. Soon every human in the chamber was talking at once. They weren't shouting or being violent. They were simply doing what humans had always done, expressing themselves freely, interrupting when they had something important to say, disagreeing with authority figures, and refusing to be silenced. You can't just order us to stop thinking, Lisa called out over the noise. The modulators aren't protecting you from chaos, Kevin Walsh added. They're protecting you from life itself. Real peace doesn't come from control, Steve Parker declared. It comes from choosing to work together despite your differences. The chamber erupted in confusion. Alien guards looked to their commanders for orders, but their commanders were looking to consensus. The AI screen flickered with what almost looked like Pawnee.